It's fine to fail. It's not fine to fail slowly. You must fail fast.
Welcome back to 40-Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders, all in just 40 minutes. Today, we're joined by Simon Franks, multi-exited entrepreneur, managing partner of early-stage investment firm Redbus Ventures, and the founder of Franks Family Foundation, the UK-based charitable organisation. Simon has truly earned his stripes by starting, scaling, and exiting multiple businesses during a stellar career. His first business was sold to the German public company Helken Media AG in 2000, and following this, Simon co-founded Lovefilm, Europe's leading online DVD rental business, which ultimately sold to Amazon in 2011. His UK film distribution company, Redbus Film Distribution, is behind some big international successes, including The Gift, Bend It Like Beckham, and Good Night and Good Luck. Today, Simon invests in early-stage companies through Redbus Ventures, the investment group founded by entrepreneurs to back entrepreneurs. Companies in Redbus Ventures' portfolio include Perkbox, Cleo, Thriver, and perhaps an even more familiar name to our listeners, Amplified People Group. So we are very grateful to Simon. Ever since 2016, Simon's main focus has been his philanthropic pursuits through the Franks Family Foundation, initiating and developing projects in Southeast Asia. And Simon has really built a name for himself as a thought leader in international development, NGO organizations, and broader civil society. With such an incredible CV, there is so much for us to discuss in today's episode, so I am very excited to welcome Simon onto the podcast. Simon, a big warm welcome to 40-Minute Mentor. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. It's good to be here.
Pleasure is all mine. Well, we're going to warm you up with some quickfire questions, as we always do, so our listeners can get to know you a little bit better. So please, can you finish the following sentences after me? The moment that defined my career was when?
I met a group of brilliant technologists working on a very crazy new technology.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'm sure we'll dive more into this later. My biggest failure to date is?
My character.
Okay, I think that's something we'll have to dive a bit more into now. What do you mean by that?
I think that I started a business very young in a time when there weren't many entrepreneurs. There were no venture capitalists in London at all in the 90s, which is a little known fact. There was no sort of culture of learning, improvement, and advice. There was no mentors. There was nothing to read on LinkedIn. There was nothing to really get any sort of background ideas and thoughts about the way you should conduct yourself and operate and stuff. And I think I was born with a very commercial instinct, and I think even since I was in the playground at school, I've always been running enterprises. What I didn't know was that the parts of your character where I think a bit of humility maybe. I think, I went from being very poor to having tens of millions of pounds in the bank in my 20s. And I didn't come from a rich neighborhood. I didn't really know anyone with money, and it really changes you a bit. And I think I didn't always act perhaps I would like to have acted. I forgive myself. I was in my 20s. And so I think my character got in my way, because I think that I met a lot of great people at the time. And I think that I probably was too much of always wanting to do my own thing and go my own way. And I think I probably missed doing some good stuff with some good people that I met, but it's not a mistake I make anymore.
Yeah, well, thank you for being so honest. And that takes, very self-aware of you. That's not always the case with such successful entrepreneurs. So I think that's really good to know. A skill I wish I had mastered earlier is?
People management.
And that is a big one that comes up a lot.
For most business leaders, it's a work in progress. It is the most important thing. Actually, it's not. The most important thing is building a business that has the potential to be profitable. The degree to which you're going to be profitable and the degree to which you're likely to have success will reflect how good you are at managing people. And I think my first business obviously was successful, but I would say I was pretty average at best at managing people.
Yeah, and I think that's something kind of a consistent theme of a lot of the entrepreneurs we've had on this podcast. It's something they got better at over the years. Certainly is the case for myself. And I think that's reassuring for any founders at the moment that might be struggling with that you also, maybe that was something that you had to work on as well.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously today I chair Redbus Ventures, which is a venture capital business. And we see lots of young, great business leaders, but most of them, if I'm honest, I've still got quite a lot to learn in terms of people management. Firstly, people are too affected by the sort of whims of the current political environment, and some people are just not tough enough. You have to lead the front, you have to inspire people, but you also have to make tough decisions, and you need to make tough decisions quickly, and you need to have the confidence to do that. You also have to know when the time is to support someone who maybe is not easy to manage, but is a great talent, and find space to allow them to behave within a context. And still, there's lots of little things like that, which it really takes time to find your way, but you've got to have broad shoulders. And I think we don't train enough our entrepreneurs these days to have those broad shoulders.
Couldn't agree more. No, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that will resonate with a lot of our audience. And finally, a life lesson I keep coming back to is
integrity. You only get one opportunity, in my opinion, to be a person of integrity. That doesn't mean people are always going to agree with you, but you do not cut corners when it comes to doing the right thing. Now, that doesn't mean your sense of the right thing will always match some other people's. You must continually say, is what I'm doing reasonable and fair?
Yeah, love that. Thank you. Thank you very much, Simon. Well, I'm glad we warmed you up with some thought-provoking questions to begin, and we're going to carry on in that vein, hearing all about your amazing career. But before we get to that, I just wanted to start at the beginning and hear a bit about your upbringing, because often these entrepreneurial seeds are sown there. So do you mind telling us a bit about your early influences in life and what in your upbringing shaped the career that you've gone on to have?
Well, it's not very romantic. And I went into business for one purpose only. Well, two purposes. One was to make money, and B was to be able to build an environment where I could prosper. I struggled in early life in relationships with people and found it difficult to play politics. And in organizations I did my graduate training in, there was a lot of politics, and I wasn't very good at playing it. I think I'm much better now, but then I wasn't. So for me, it was really a drive to build an independent vehicle for myself and to make money. And I think, again, that's something that's been lost by a lot of the sort of new, very airy-fairy entrepreneurial culture that we have. For those of us who are entrepreneurs when no one else wanted to be an entrepreneur, and just as an aside, when I told my dad I was leaving my job to be an entrepreneur, he literally looked at me with horror, because in those days, being an entrepreneur was synonymous with staying at home playing PlayStation all the time, saying you're an entrepreneur. So for me, it was really about making money. I'm absolutely clear about that. In all the businesses we invest in, I try and say to them, your number one focus has to be making money. Now, don't do negative things for the world. So don't go and do blood diamonds, people traffic, or any of these disgusting things that people make money from, or drug deal or whatever. But no matter how many good impacts you think your business will do, no matter how much joy and social utility it will have, it has to be first and foremost an entity for making money. Because if it isn't that, it won't be a business that will survive long. And if along the way you can, by the way, do some great stuff for humanity and social impact, great. But that cannot be the purpose.
Thank you. Yeah, love that. I heard that you always wanted to be an entrepreneur. You may have taken a different path to begin with, and clearly, maybe your father wasn't that impressed with your pursuit of entrepreneurship originally. I'm sure that quickly dissipated once you had the success you had. But did you? Has that always been a calling to you? Do you feel like you are born with those sorts of entrepreneurial traits, or was that something that emerged over time?
So I think I think the word entrepreneur is being misused here, because I was born with very commercial instinct. I remember my first business was selling bubble gums in the school playground, because I had a pen pal in America who sent me watermelon bubble gums, which you couldn't get when I was a kid. You could only get one flavor of bubble gum. And I realized I could buy them a packet for 5 cents in the US. I could sell each bubble gum for 5p. And that was my first business. I made hundreds of pounds from it. That was just commercial instinct. I was about 8. So, but that's not entrepreneurialism. Because entrepreneurialism can take lots of some of the best entrepreneurs that I've met are in public services. I've met people in the NHS who are amazing entrepreneurs, people who are in philanthropy who are great entrepreneurs. For me, being a great entrepreneur is about solving problems, showing leadership, having ideas that make change. And you can be an entrepreneur in any field. It doesn't just have to be business. And I think actually through my philanthropy work, through my foundation, I actually think I'm a really good entrepreneur also in international development. I think our programs have been very successful and made a real difference. So I think for me, my specific aptitude is commerce. Generally have a mindset of an entrepreneur, which means that I'm not afraid by roadblocks and obstacles. I'm not afraid by things that are difficult.
Yeah, I really like that. And yeah, we're going to come on to talk about the different endeavors. There's a lot in your CV and experience, so we're going to have to skip over some bits. Yeah, not at all. Not at all. There's just so much. There's a rich tapestry of experiences.
But the truth is that there just weren't very many entrepreneurs. I don't meet any other entrepreneurs who started businesses in the 90s. It was just such a rare thing to do, especially in this country.
Yeah, and a very brave thing to do, I guess, when it's not the traditional path. I think there's clearly, yeah, as you said, there's a natural commercial instinct there. I guess you have scaled and exited multiple businesses, and the first one was in your mid-20s. So do you mind telling our audience a little bit about that first business and that first exit? What were some of those early lessons from that first experience?
I touched on it a little bit at the beginning. So as you said, when I started my career, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I went to my tutor at university and said, I want to start a business. He said, would you have any money? I said, no. He says, do your parents have any money? I said, no. He said, do you have any friends whose parents have money? I went, no. He said, in that case, there's only one way for you to start your own business, and that go into banking. I was like, what? How does that make sense? Well, I ended up going into banking to try and make a little bit of money so I could start my own business. That's how I started up doing graduate training in JP Morgan and etc. When I finally decided I was going to start a business, I'd seen something called the Bowie bonds, which was when David Bowie ran out of money. He securitized the rights to his music. He was the first person to do that and was able to earn upfront a large amount of money, which was against the income stream from his royalties. And I thought you could probably do that with film and buy lots of film rights and securitize those. Whilst setting out on that journey, I quickly realized that there were some reasons why it would be more complicated than I thought. Not that it wouldn't be profitable, but that it would take time. And I didn't have that much money, so I didn't have time. But just purely by luck, I came across a guy called Cliff Stanford, who's sadly no longer with us, but he was the first real internet pioneer of the UK. He created a company called Demon Internet. And if you're my age, that was the only way onto the internet. And so Demon Internet was very successful and got subsequently bought by Scottish Telecom. Anyway, Demon Internet, when they got bought, had an R&D department that Scottish Telecom didn't want. And a bunch of guys who were caricatures of engineers in the 90s. They were very young, very fun, long-haired, heavy metal type people who didn't shower that much and were very messy and worked in what looked like a dungeon to me. And I met these guys and I said, so Cliff said, you guys are all leaving. What are you going to do next? They're like, well, we haven't got a job. We're pretty worried about it. I said, well, why don't you show me what you do? And they showed me this technology. And basically they'd worked on compression techniques of images such that they could compress a moving image so much that it could go over the internet. Now, when I was at this time, in the 90s, internet speeds were incredibly low. They weren't broadband yet. The only way you could get anything like close to broadband speed, which i.e. half of that was, I think, called ISDN, and you used to have two ISDN lines, which is what big companies use for fax machines. And with that amount of bandwidth, we managed to compress a moving image to play for a movie from point to point. And that's certainly the first time a movie was played in Europe when we set that trial up. And I think it's possibly in the world, as an American company claims they did it, but who knows? And I looked at that and I went, oh my God, if you can put moving images from one point to the other point, a computer is a TV. And that started a whole chain of events around me thinking, well, then rights to filmed entertainment are worth a lot more than people think they are. And this technology has the potential to really reshape the way we consume entertainment. And that was the first business I was involved in. And we bought a load of film rights and ended up, as a consequence of that, being in the film distribution business, but I never expected to be in directly in that sense. And that business was bought unexpectedly in the first .com boom. Actually, it was bought after we tried to float and the float failed. It was during the first .com mess. And if you read our prospectus, which is so interesting, this was before Netflix even existed. We were Netflix. We had loads of exclusive film rights. We were going to stream them over the internet. But what I got horribly wrong was the speed at which broadband would roll out. I remember reading a report by Jupiter saying by 2005, every household will have broadband internet. I think that was out by about 7 years. So we sold because we didn't float. But that was my first business. And obviously that was a successful sale to a German public company. And then the technology was split off from the rights, and the rights business went on to be successful. And that rights business today is called Lionsgate. It's a very successful US-owned business. And the rights and the technology was split off into another vehicle. And that left me with a healthy amount of cash in my late 20s, which felt pretty nice.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine. And I guess that was a precursor to you co-founding and ultimately scaling and exiting Lovefilm, which I know many of our listeners will remember, which really was a category defining company. So, I know there's so much that we could dive into, but I'd love to hear your reflections of that scaling journey and in your major lessons from the Lovefilm journey.
Well, Lovefilm was a combination of a number of businesses. So the business we started acquired, I think, in total 3 companies, which were all in similar spaces, all doing a similar thing to us. The Lovefilm brand was by far the best. There was Screen Select, there was Video Island, there was Lovefilm, there was one other, I can't even remember it now. All of them were trying to now replicate the Netflix model. So in the interim, for me selling my business to Lovefilm, was quite a few years difference. Netflix had been born in San Francisco, and we were all just copying it, basically. I mean, we all had our own tweaks on it, but we were all just copying it. I think the thing which was special about my company was because of the rights business that I owned, we had lots of exclusive rights. So we had deals with Disney and with Warner Brothers. And that gave us lots of exclusive content, which other people couldn't get. But what was really odd about that was we were now sending DVDs through the post as a way for people to see movies, whereas I'd worked a number of years earlier on technology to stream stuff. It felt all a bit backwards. The big lesson for me on Lovefilm, though, is although obviously it was a success for everyone made lots of money, and that's all great. The big thing which really disappoints me is that business was leader in many countries in Europe, Scandinavia, Germany, Ireland, UK. Netflix hadn't arrived yet, and yet we ended up selling rather than building it and continuing. There should be no Europe. There should have just been Lovefilm, and I'm still sad about that. I think I've got over it with a bit of therapy, but still very sad. I'm sad for Europe because we didn't need to be dominated by a US company. We could have had a European version, but it was still very hard to raise big sums of money. And even when we could raise big sums of money, VC's life cycle, generally means they want to sell within their life cycle of their fund. And if they've got a profitable investment, they want to take it. They don't want to run it for another 15 years. And maybe that's changed, but in those days, there weren't very many VCs still, and they wanted to show the profits they'd made. I still feel absolutely gutted that we sold to Amazon. I know that sounds ridiculous to say.
It's incredible to hear you say that, but I also understand it. I think given the way the world then went, there was obviously a huge opportunity. Do you think that outcome could have been different, or do you think that just the pressure was there to sell?
Well, I think the pressure was from the VCs. I think it was a terrible decision. I fought it at the time. I didn't have the power to stop it. By then, I was no longer a controlling shareholder, and I think it was disastrous. But again, it sounds so churlish because everyone made money, and it is a success story for people to celebrate. But actually, really, it speaks a bit to the total failings of the European ecosystem. We had some amazing entrepreneurs all over Europe, especially in the UK, but we're just not long-termist in the same way. It's so much easier to raise money in America. People are so much more supportive of long-term growth over short-term. Netflix shouldn't be it, and then its dominance, and that's a shame.
This episode is sponsored by Foundation Partners, part of the Amplified Group family. Foundation Partners is reinventing how ambitious early-stage companies access people and talent support. Typically, when it comes to people and talent, founders take one or two routes. They try to manage it all themselves, which comes with huge opportunity costs compared to focusing on product or go-to-market, or they hire a generalist, expected to cover everything from culture to recruitment to performance. Foundation Partners offers a more impactful alternative, a fully flexible, fractional people and talent team with specialist skill sets and hands-on delivery that starts driving impact in just 2 weeks. So if you're building something ambitious and want the right people and talent support behind you, don't go it alone. As a 40-Minute Mentor listener, you can book a free 1-hour advisory call with a managing partner worth £500. Just head to www.foundationpartners.co.uk/contact and mention this podcast. Now, back to today's 40-Minute Mentor.
Well, I guess you will have learned so many things along the way from your various ventures, and we really want to use this time to help any founders listening to this who are going through the ups and downs of the roller coaster that is founder life. So what for you have been the biggest mistakes that you've made in your entrepreneurial career, and what were the biggest learnings from them?
To be honest, as I said to you at the beginning of this, my character got in my way a few times, and hopefully I've improved that. In terms of business, though, my instinct is pretty good, and I can't really point to any big mistake that I've made. Probably it's better to split my career into two things. So I was a founder of 3 businesses a long time ago, and then spent the rest of my life involved in philanthropy and chairing a venture capital business. And obviously the venture capital thing is the other side of the table. It's the investor side. And I think that part of the reasons for our success in our VC operation is because we've got insight into what makes a good entrepreneur. And I think I do look a lot at the entrepreneur in a way that maybe some others look at them, but I'm looking for attributes that resonate with me. So I can't point to loads of things that I did, big mistakes that I made and things I've learned from them. I think the management of people and my character needed a lot of improvement, and I hopefully have improved that. So I can't really give you a great answer on that one.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. Well, you mentioned your move into a broader career, but maybe focusing on Redbus in the beginning, started that in 2003. I love the kind of concept of a sort of investment firm built by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. So why at that time Was that the route you chose to go down? I'd be interested to understand the logic then at the time.
I really like that question because it allows me to talk about something that I'm passionate about. So when I was in business, I never did any PR of any kind. I've never paid a PR company to do PR about me or my business, and which is a pretty unusual thing to hear these days. But still, during those business days, there was lots of press about us. We won lots of awards and things like that, and which felt nice. I got an ego, so it was nice for those things. But when I sold after Lovefilm, I went off and spent almost over 10 years just in philanthropy, working in Cambodia, Laos, and Nepal, building various projects that were really important to me. In that time, there was not a single article about me, no awards, I became irrelevant. And I was pretty young to feel irrelevant in my 30s. If I'm honest, the reason why I started investing in other companies was because I was feeling a bit insecure and a bit irrelevant. I'm sitting there in Cambodia thinking, I was a success once. It's all over pretty soon. I started investing. I didn't invest in other companies to make money. I presumed every penny I invested, I would lose. But if I could have some fun helping someone start a business, I thought that would be a good use of my time. And I had plenty of spare time at that point. And so that's how I started investing. It was never to be in business. I never expected Redbus Ventures to be a business. It was meant to be just a little small thing I did personally to support some entrepreneurs and hopefully not too much money. That was literally my starting point.
Wow, that's so interesting. And we'll come back to philanthropy because that's clearly a very important part of your life and career. So we'll love to talk about that further. But just honing in on your investing experience to begin with, can you share a bit more about your investment thesis at Redbus Ventures and how you work with founders in your portfolio?
Well, so firstly, I don't think that VCs should interfere too much in a business. And one of the things I'm very wary of is some terrible advice I've heard other VCs. And there are some great VCs. I'm not anti-VC at all, but there are lots of people who've never run a business telling people who are running a business how to run their business. And I'm pretty skeptical about some of that stuff. My initial position was when we only had 1, 2, 3, 4 investments, I would be available for calls on any issues. But I would nearly always say to the founder, please call me with the difficult problems where you screwed up rather than tell me what's going well. You know what? People have a habit of being able to know what's going well and maximize it. I'm much better at problem solving. I don't panic. I don't get too excited when we win. I don't get too panicked when we lose. And I like trying to brainstorm. And I'd say to companies, come through with the problems. And then as those companies, some companies do well, some didn't do well. The ones that did do well, then I would start to be helpful again to them when they wanted to think about selling or buying another company or doing some kind of corporate transaction or speaking to investment banks. Because obviously in my business, I must have bought over 10 businesses. I know I've bid for a public company. I've done all sorts of things in that sense, so which probably most founders haven't. So I could give them advice for that. But there was a very sort of early period where I don't think I wanted to speak too much to founders unless they needed me. I think putting demands on founders to report stuff. I'm like, I've often said to new founders who send me like a 10-page update after 1 month, I'm like, I don't want to hear it from you again for the next year. Go and do what you need to do. Don't worry about me or other investors, but come back to us if there's a problem you need help with. And I feel like I hope that most of the people in our portfolio, and there's also a thing when you work with great entrepreneurs, a lot of the time they don't really need much from you and you should get out of their way. I will say that I've heard a lot of bad advice given to a lot of companies, which I think has really hurt them. And my new bugbear, which I'm just going to throw in now because I'm so tired of reading terrible advice on LinkedIn. I mean, constant stream of business advice for entrepreneurs, most of which I consider to be either just wrong or misplaced because there's no context for it. So that advice may be great advice in this context, but not in that context. And I think that so in my day, there was no advice for entrepreneurs. Now there's like 100x too much advice from them.
Too much. Yeah. Well, I guess that's why we tried to interview people that have really been there and done, who can give really pithy, punchy, tangible advice. And that's what this podcast is all about. So,
So thank you. I think there was a compliment in there, so I appreciate that. But I just say that it's really, really important for entrepreneurs to really think about who they're going to listen to. And if they're going to get advice from articles on the web or on LinkedIn or somewhere, they've got to look at the context of that advice, because their context will probably be very different and that advice might not be good. And one thing I just have to say, because again, it's really important to people listening. You read lots of advice saying, at first I tried, it didn't work out. And then I tried harder, it didn't work out. And I almost failed. And I went bust. And then this happened, but I kept on persevering. 99% of people who keep persevering when the market keeps telling them that they're wrong are going to end up driving a taxi. It is not a good way to go. A good commercial instinct means that sometimes you go, either this is not working or it will never work, or it's not working now, but to get it to working is going to be very risky and expensive and timely, and there's better things to do. And I have had many conversations, even with companies in my portfolio, where they're racing around. I've said to the founder, are you sure you want to do this? Maybe you should just quit. It's been a long, hard 5-6 years. Maybe, the opportunity cost for founders of flogging dead horses is their time, their beautiful time. We have so little of it. Have your eyes open. Don't give up easily. Fight on, pivot, absolutely do all those things. I did that in my business. But I have made some businesses where I've been involved, where I've just gone, we got this wrong. It's fine to fail. It's not fine to fail slowly. You must fail fast.
Yeah, no, great advice. And unfortunately, you see far too often founders struggle their doors to keep and they lose so much, and it doesn't benefit anyone. So I think that's sometimes having a real hard look at, in the mirror, and also getting really good advice from genuine mentors. Sometimes you just need to hear it from someone else.
Yeah, I also think investors, I totally agree with you, James, but I also think that investors sometimes almost guilt founders to keep going. I mean, I won't do that. We'll make investment, we have our eyes open. If someone worked really hard, did their best, and the things they said to us were true, if it goes wrong, I don't love them any less. I respect them the same, and I want them to get out there. Although I'm not someone that believes having a series of failures makes you a great potential candidate. Yes, I don't.
I really agree with you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I guess entrepreneurship and being a founder is not for the faint-hearted, and you've experienced the ups and downs. So you've invested in a whole load of fantastic businesses, but you've also had startups in your portfolio, I'm sure, struggle as well. So how did you develop the resilience that got you through the difficult days? And what is your advice for any founders like this that might be going through a really rough period at the moment, who are at that point of reflection? Is there anything can you build that, or is that natural? I'd love just to hear your perspective on that topic.
I don't know if you can build that. I don't know if you can build commercial instinct, but I've got 4 children. I'm certainly going to try and teach them that. We'll find out if it's possible. I suspect that commercial instinct is something that's innate. The resilience thing is difficult because you don't want to be too resilient to the point that you don't listen to anybody and you never give up. So there's a danger there. And I've got to say that I was very lucky in my businesses. I had a lot more luck than I deserved. But one of the best bits of luck was that my first business straight away, the first pivot was very quick, didn't cost us anything. The second thing we were working on, I knew it was clear that we were right and onto something good straight away. The problem we had was cash flow, because I couldn't raise any money, terrible at raising money. So people were calling me up saying, hey, you owe us $5,000, $10,000. I couldn't pay. It was really, really not very, very fun. I'm glad to say that none of my businesses have ever not paid back any of their debts, and every investor's always made money. But for me, perseverance was just saying to people, trust me, it's going to be fine. I'm going to work this out. But I never had, from once we pivoted straight, I knew we were onto a winner. So I think I didn't have that sort of, oh my God, is this going to work? So you hear a lot of people talk today about product market fit. But product market fit is not like a binary thing. It's not like, oh, you're at 0, you have no product market fit. Oh, you're at 1, you have it. It just isn't like that. You've got to navigate where you are. You're 0.3, you're 0.6, you're 0.7. 0.3, moving fast towards something. It's very hard to know. And different industries give you different speeds of getting product market fit and stuff. So it's really involved a lot of honesty and real understanding of the business you're in. And one of the things that I've tried to teach people to do to try and work it out is to sit down with a spreadsheet and build a probability outcome model. And that's what I do for everything. What are the odds of this? What are the odds of that? The odds of that? You add up all the odds, do your expected return, you work out if it's worth it. But that involves some honesty. And I do genuinely think that there's this lie that we're told that entrepreneurs are really optimistic people. I think it's total bullshit. Entrepreneurs are at best realists, good entrepreneurs. Because if you're an entrepreneur as a super optimist, yes, at the nth degree, you'll get, let's say, someone who starts Google, who's just a complete genius, who I'm not at that league, so I don't know what that kind of genius feels like. But most people were not geniuses like that. So you're not going to probably, if the market's telling you your business is not right, it's not because they don't understand it. It's because it's just not right. Because I'll tell you this thing, right? Even in the UK, which is definitely way behind the US, if you've got a really good idea and you're a sensible guy who has integrity, and even if you're not a good salesman, if you can present yourself reasonably well, you will raise the money. May not be the valuation you want, you'll get it. If you cannot raise money from any source over a few years, if you're literally scrapping for every penny, there's probably a reason why you're not able to.
That is the perfect segue, Simon, to the next question, which is Redbus Ventures has been around for over 20 years. You've backed some incredibly well-known brands. So what are the patterns you've noticed amongst the best founders, the characteristics that really appeal to you to write that check?
Okay, so I can't give you an easy answer to that again, I'm afraid. We do pre-seed and seed. We do follow on to later rounds, but we never start at later rounds. Our real expertise is working with very early stage entrepreneurs. And as I said to you, it's not that we have this way of doing things that's completely set in stone. But I can tell you this, it starts with, is what they're doing completely ridiculous or not? If it's not completely ridiculous, keep going. Is the entrepreneur seriously credible, commercial, able to deal with pressure? I often get told that we ask the most difficult questions and do it in quite a pressured way. And that's totally intentional. People who really understand their own business, really under pressure, come to life. And I think that all we're looking for is not a ridiculous business model. And I think we're pretty good at knowing what's ridiculous. Our failure rate is pretty low. And look for an entrepreneur who shows the characteristics. It may indicate he is a good entrepreneur, a good business leader. And that's it. Now, obviously, we've got, when you've looked at, we get 60 unsolicited inbounds a week. We have done for years and years and years. When you get that much flow, we look at so many businesses that we really understand sectors that are interesting at the moment, and we really understand the trends and the sort of dynamics of industries, so we can know what kind of margin we're looking for, what kind of R&D spend, and we know there's on a metric. So obviously that's a given. We've done that little bit of homework. But really, as I said to you, it doesn't take a lot to get us to invest. We're doing, 10 to 15 companies a year. But there are a few things that are real red flags to us. There are a few things that are really encouraging. We're not writing multi-million pound checks first minute. We're writing six-figure checks. We can afford to lose those. And we wait to see how you go from your pre-seed to your seed and what you've done and how did you approach things? Did you hit the numbers, your forecasts? Have you delivered on what you said? How are your team responding to you? There's lots of things we start to look at that give you confidence to continue on the journey with them. And by the way, if I did have a magic simple thing, I wouldn't tell you, because obviously that'd be part of my equity value. But the truth is I don't.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I guess from the many companies you have backed, I appreciate this might be like picking your favorite child. Are there particular startups in the portfolio that you have a particular soft spot for, or just wanted to highlight?
Yeah, no, there are. Now, obviously, I'm not going to lie to you. I invest to make money, not to make friends. And the students I like the best, the ones that make us loads of money. But the first one that came to mind is a guy called Stephen Dash and charitable.com. That was like a fund returner investment for us. He was a guy that we had an office in Sydney, and he sat in our office. I loved the guy. He's one of those, just an out and out entrepreneur. And, when he said he was starting a business, it was like obviously I'm going to invest in him. And I think the first round was pre-money of $4 million. I remember saying to him, that's bloody expensive, but I did it nonetheless, I think. And it sold for, I think, $450 million. So that feels pretty good. But the best thing about that is that we were friends before, friends after. But he was a class guy. He's someone I did do quite a lot of regular calls with. I think actually I was even a paid advisor for a while, but he's someone who, his business grew so fast with so many things he was juggling. He's an absolutely amazing entrepreneur, juggled a million things at once. But that's when someone like me perhaps can't add value, having done some of those things before. When you're working with a great entrepreneur, it feels good. Another guy that came to mind was Gautier at Pelago. Gautier is a visionary. There's not many people that I meet who I think are visionaries. He's a visionary. When he pitched Pelago to me when it was just starting, I think that was a pre-money of, I don't know, 2 million or something like that. He said, I'm going to take on the publishing world, and actually not take it on. He wanted to be a part of the publishing world, but he wanted to take on the publishing industry. It was absolutely mental idea, brilliant, but I could think of a million reasons why it was going to fail, because persuading publishers that this is what they should do and this will be their long-term benefits, which is proving that it is in the benefits of long-term publishers. But to build Spotify for books before Spotify was really Spotify was quite a visionary thing to do. And, that's just a case of sometimes me and Gautier disagree, because I'm much more a commercial hard nose than he is. But when you're with someone who's got a vision and just relentlessly pushes that vision and inspires people, that's really cool. And I really have enjoyed working with him. Be wrong to not mention Saurav and Chu at Perkbox, again, another super massive multiple exit for us. And of course, Cleo, although Bust Barney doesn't really need any help from anybody these days, and I don't speak to him now, he's a very cool dude who is grown into, an amazing entrepreneur. Whenever I speak to him, I'm like, wow, this guy's so good. So those are ones I'm going to mention. But, there's loads of great other companies, out there, there's Focal AI, there's Roots, there's Wild today. We had an exit today.
Yes, congratulations. I read about that.
Yeah, so we had Lonsec last year as well, which is another big return. So I think that if I'm honest, the people you end up, I like most of the entrepreneurs in our businesses, and most of them are great. But obviously the ones that are younger, smaller, still growing, I love them, but I love them more when they exit and allow us to do good works.
Yeah, fair enough. No, thank you for sharing. Before we get to our wrap-up question, Simon, I just wanted to touch upon your philanthropic ventures. You set up the Franks Family Foundation in 2006, and you mentioned a bit earlier about some of the work you did there. So do you mind telling me, you said it was always a passion for you. So why Where did that come from? And can you tell us a bit about the impact you've had over the years?
Yeah, sure. I'm super proud to talk about all this stuff. So firstly, I can't claim to being about altruism. I've always been born with a sense of justice, and I hate seeing some of the injustice around the world. And I've always thought that if I was ever in a position to try and right some of that, I would. I made quite a lot of money in my very early years, and the alternative was to sort of spend it on fast cars and fast life. And I probably thought that would be a path to destruction. So instead, I thought I'll spend some of this money trying to right a wrong somewhere. If it's okay, I want to twist this to advice for people behind. You heard me say at the beginning of this interview that I do business to make money, not to make impact per se, although I'm happy if it does have positive impact. That's not to say that you shouldn't care about impact, but I've said it many times, I'll say it again here. Make your money. And then if you really want to make the world a better place, which I hope that you do, use that money then on a very focused mission to do impact. Don't try and combine the two. It often doesn't work. You end up with succeeding in neither. In my specific case, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that there were some parts of the world that were incredibly poor, where people really suffered and had no opportunity. For me, that would have been the most crushing thing in my life, to have no opportunity. I'm so blessed to have grown up in this amazing, wonderful country that we live in. And there were opportunities here if you grab them. If you're living in Laos or Cambodia or Nepal or Myanmar or other places like that, there's very little opportunity for you. You can't get an education. You can barely get access to a doctor. And I thought that just really feels really unfair. I want to try and solve that. And I picked small countries where the amount of money I could afford to give away, which was not billions, but was maybe tens of millions. That was, in a country like that could have an impact. There were small countries. And then more importantly, I realized that I'm not Bill Gates. The weight of my money won't change anything in the way, he's done such amazing work because he has such power to make things happen with that scale he has. But for someone who's doesn't have anything like that wealth, I realized I'd have to give time to lever the money that I can. And so originally I started to do 5 years, ended up being over 10, working in country a lot of the time. And the first 2 years involved doing nothing other than going to meet other organizations working. People never fucking listen to other people. It's essential. I knew what I wanted to do. I didn't know how to achieve it. I literally bought hundreds of different leaders of organizations, international, multinational, and local charities, saying, please tell me about your work. What have you done? I'm not going to be a donor, but I buy you a lunch in any restaurant you want. Tell me about the problems you see, the things you solved, and your frustrations. I learned so much. And from that, I formulated a plan about what I wanted to do. It was focused on education. And I'm very proud to say that, some of the projects that we're involved in are the leading projects in this field in those countries. And if you go to Cambodia and talk about new generation schools, you'll see they are the top performing schools. They're free for people to join. We have 11,000 children that are getting an education every year from us. And these kids are coming out not just educated to a high degree, but better citizens. We talk a lot about their role in society and how they can help Cambodia develop and become a more prosperous society. And so we're really passionate about that. And also one other thing I should going to mention is that there's a hospital that we are co-founders of, which I'm super proud of, in Luang Prabang in Laos. It's the only modern pediatric hospital in the country. If you were a child before and you had a very basic thing, you could die. Now there's a hospital you can go to. It's free if you can't afford it. And last year, that hospital had 42,000 kids come through it. These things, just to be involved with these things and the people around them and the amazing, amazing staff. I've been so blessed to be around some amazing people making amazing sacrifices to help the world. And the great news for everyone listening to this is that entrepreneurs are amazingly capable in the field of international development. International development is just a series of problems on top of problems. And I've never met better entrepreneurs to help solve that. So if you get this amazing international development executives out there who don't know how to rattle the cage, they're brilliant at executing organizations, but the industry of philanthropy tells you not to upset people, not to change things, not to challenge them. But an entrepreneur with a great international development executive, you can really start to solve problems. And really recommend anyone listening to this who gets an exit, give me a call. I will happily help you on your way.
That's wonderful. And such an amazing impact. That's having real positive impact for a lot of lives. And that's all you can ask for. So thank you for sharing about that. We're sadly an end, Simon, but I've got two final wrap-up questions for you. I thoroughly love this chat. We've covered so much ground, but this is 40-Minute Mentor. So I have to ask you, if you could be mentored by anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
That's a really good question. So I think, I'm not going to give you a name, but I actually think there's some sports coaches out there who are amazing at teaching a bit of humility, teaching a bit of resilience, teaching a bit of honesty, and teaching tactics. I was never very good at sport. I'm talentless, tried hard at pretty much everything and failed. But I actually realized that my friends who were entrepreneurs, who were involved in proper team sports, their coaches had a real impact on them. And I really recommend that entrepreneurs out there find some books of great team coaches. There's a book, The Coach of the famous quarterback now, the one's dating Taylor Swift, that guy, his coach wrote, read that. It's really interesting just in terms of getting your mindset in the right place, a winning ideology, not questioning yourself, opening your eyes, hard work, and all those kind of things. So I'm mental obsessed.
Great answer. Thank you. And finally, what is one final piece of advice, that could be career or life advice, that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
The most important thing you've got in your own life is time. And when it comes to business, people ignore time. You maybe have a brilliant idea. If it's going to take 10 years to get there, that might be too much. When you're working on something and it's not working, don't think about the fact that your burn is low, so it doesn't matter. Think about the time that you're burning. I've wasted too much time in my life and I regret that. Entrepreneurs tend to not think about time, tend to think about money, time. Focus on the time you spend on things. Second thing I have to say is just work really hard, because I still think that's massively undervalued, and the younger generation may be a little bit light on the work front. Just want you to know that when I did my business, I worked at least 14 hours a day, and I worked 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. That's the only way to do it.
Yeah, there's no escaping it, I think, when it comes to building a business. And yeah, I've loved this conversation, Donald. It's been really interesting. You've achieved so much. So it's great to tap into your mentorship today. Thank you for taking the time. And yeah, I'm sure our audience will really appreciate your insights.
Thanks, James. And I'm thrilled if any of the things I've said are useful to anybody. Genuinely, it makes me so happy. So good luck to all of you.
Thank you so much.
See you later.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really hope that you found it useful and inspiring. If we have left any questions unanswered, or if you have any feedback or guest recommendations for future series, then please make sure you get in touch on info@jbmc.co.uk. I often get asked by listeners how you can help us spread the word about 40 Minute Mentor. There are 2 simple ways you can help. Firstly, share this episode on your preferred social media platform, and LinkedIn is probably where I'm most likely to see it. And you can also leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every share on social media and review left on the podcast platforms really helps us to get 40 Minute Mentor in front of new audiences and share the power of mentorship even further. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, and I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday for even more pocket-sized mentorship.